start with a little exercise that I'll be reading out of a book, and you can just get comfortable and listen to these words. This is a chance for you just to, actually I'm just going to read this out of the book, and it's a chance for you to start thinking about sound. Imagine that the whole universe, everything we know, including cars, computers, airplanes, houses, buildings, lakes, oceans, continents, our bones, flesh, and nerves, is a fountain of dream images generated and sustained by submerged sound. Further, imagine that everything we do and think, whether good or bad, moral or immoral, is an attempt to seek out and merge with that sound. Our goal is to return to the source of that fountain. Although we may identify with the object of value, man or the woman, the car, the real attraction is the resonance we experience in the presence of that person or that thing. The real attraction is the resonance we experience when in the presence of that person or thing. The experience vibrates us like a tuning fork and becomes a sonic homing buoy confirming our inner journey. Further, imagine that you are a being of sound composed of many tones. Your shape, movements, desires, and motivations come from an inner concert. Your shape, movements, desires, and motivations come from an inner concert. Everything you know and feel is sound. Your concert is everywhere. When you dance, your body organs will make sounds, and your muscles will play the correct tones. Your voice will sing praises, and the stars will shine upon you. So my task this evening is to share with you ways in which I have integrated some very ancient practices and ideas into this fairly modern thing we call psychotherapy. And it's a challenging and daunting task because it's a big topic, and so I've tried to pare things down in a way that we can take in. And remember that my concern and my focus really tonight is how do we use this in psychotherapy? And I'll try to give some background information as we go. So I'm going to move back here to the computer. So are most people seeing clients at this time? Nope. No. Not going to be soon. So either started already or will be soon. Mm-hmm.
Is it okay if we turn the lights off?
Oh, yes.
I
get that.
You want them all on? Or is that good?
Yeah, that will work. Thank you.
Okay. So, combining sound with psychotherapy is the use of sound to enhance, motivate, and amplify the psychotherapeutic experience. There are lots of ways to do that. For instance, one of my favorite techniques is to have a little bell like this in the room. Get comfortable and listen to the sound of this bell as I ring it. And just signal, just kind of put your finger up in the air when you absolutely cannot hear it any longer. So that's everybody. What did you notice? What did that cause you to do? I would suggest that it caused you to focus on this sound. And there were other sounds in the room, of course, but you had to really focus on this one. And so if you were to do this exercise when a client comes into the room and sits down, it's going to shift the energy in the room and it's going to create a focus right away. So this is one way that you can be using sound in psychotherapy. It's very simple and very basic. And I think you'll find over time that if you do this exercise, you'll hear the bell perhaps longer and longer, because you'll be really learning how to tune in and focus on this one sound more. Now, the quality of the bell is also important, because the sound that's coming from this bell is very high quality and it's nourishing. But that's another story.
Are you able to define what you mean, at least by high quality?
It has a tone, a vibrational tone that is nourishing to the body, and it's made out of brass. So if you're looking for a bell to use, something that's solid brass, it's going to give a good tone.
And we know it's nourishing to the body
because of other kinds of research that I just can't really go
get
into.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh. So using sound work, which I call this, because this is not sound healing. So I have started calling this sound work, and using it in conjunction with psychotherapy can help with emotional self-regulation, can encourage grounding, focus, and expanded awareness, can help with resourcing and confidence, develop self-awareness, and be effective self-care for both clients and clinicians. And I think I would really like to highlight that last point, because, as you know, doing this work takes a focus on self-care all the time. And there are certain techniques that you can use with sound to both clear yourself before you sit with a client, after you sit with a client, at any time of the week, whenever you're feeling anxiety. You can bring your anxiety and stress level down with sound, and I will show you some ways to do that this evening. So even if you never decide to use sound with clients, say you're attracted to it and you decide to use it as a way to clear yourself and your own energy in this work, that would be enough just in itself. If you want to share it with your clients, that's wonderful as well. And if questions come up that are either confusing about what I'm saying or with the slides, please ask. Otherwise, we'll have question and answers at the end as well. There's a handout on the table for you to take, and it's called Ways to Use Sound in Psychotherapy. So these are 10 ways in which we can use sound to benefit our clients and ourselves. And one is for relaxation and restoration. And what would come under that category? Perhaps listening to some music, which we'll do later. Tuning forks, which I will show you in a few minutes, are some examples of that. To focus and strengthen attention, we just did that with the bell. Ringing the bell and listening to it and really having to focus on that. To enter non-ordinary states. Probably many of you have taken shamanic journeys with a drum or a rattle, and that is the use of sound, taking you into a non-ordinary state of reality where your imagination is enhanced and information may come to you in ways that it doesn't come to you in your normal waking state. To work with memory, that again can be achieved by listening to music or listening to recorded sounds. Tuning forks can also help to work with memory. To enhance the imagination, again, listening to music, and there's a technique that we'll come to later that's specifically for that. By the way, music is very effective and being used working with Alzheimer's patients right now for that reason. To enhance the imagination, to work, I'm reading off of my sheet, which is different than what's up there, so don't worry, we'll get to them all. To work with blocks or complex. There might come a time in the therapy when the client is blocked around something that either they are not understanding, something they're in a complex. And using sound can help to kind of change the stress level in the environment to allow somebody to drop through to another level and layer of understanding. To balance, certainly the tuning forks can help with that, as well as listening to the singing bowls. To give voice, which can be simply humming or singing, toning, and to connect with tradition, which would be using traditional instruments. So those are some ways in which we can use sound. These are definitions out of the dictionary. Psychotherapy, the treatment of mental disorders by psychological rather than medical means. May be used in conjunction with physiological interventions, which in my mind could be sound. But this is from the dictionary, okay? Just thought we'd start with the basics. Sound is defined as an oscillating energy waves within the audible range. So you're hearing my voice, you're hearing other sounds in the room. Sound originates and travels from one source to another as waves, each with its own velocity and intensity, frequency, pitch, and wavelength. Here are some people that I have been drawing upon, and there are others, of course. Stan Groff has experimented with music and breath, and now the breath work that we do.
Is this on the handout?
Is that on the handout? No. Helen Bonney came up with a technique called GIM. We'll talk about that a little bit later. John Beaulieu, resonance and human tuning. The piece that I read to you at the very beginning out of the book was by John. Pauline Oliveira, deep listening, meditation, and deep listening to the sounds inside that you're not necessarily hearing with your outer ears. Joshua leads psychoacoustics. He has several books out. Some of them are on the bibliography. Alfred Tomatis, a pioneer in hearing the functions of the ear. Sylvia Nakash, who teaches here at CIIS. Nada Yoga, medicinal music and raga. Don Campbell, medical sound environments and toning. So people to look for if you're interested in this work. So let's take a few minutes to experience.
Could you flip back to that last slide for a second?
The last slide? Sure.
Yeah, thanks.
We're going to take a few minutes now to experience some different sounds. And if you have a piece of paper available, it would be great if you could write down kind of what you notice after each. So what I'd ask you all to do is just to get comfortable. And you may want to close your eyes or just have a soft gaze. Just allow yourself to listen to these different sounds that I'll be making. Take a moment to write your response to this sound.
Can you tell us a little about that instrument?
I will later. Definitely. Ready for the next sound? Again, just get comfortable. This one might be very high register. Here comes the next sound. Now the next sound you are going to make with your voice. And what I'd ask is that you just lightly hold your hand over your throat and hum. Just simply hum. And it can be one tone, it can be 2 or 3 tones. Just a So when you think about it, our language is filled with terms like high-strung, low-keyed, in tune, out of tune, resonate with. And all of these terms refer to a person's sound. So the last exercise is a chance for you to tune into your own sound, which is listening to the sound of your nervous system. In order to do that, you'll want to find a quiet spot, and this room is fairly quiet. And you want to get your body comfortable, sit comfortably, and close your eyes. Take a few deep breaths. So gradually allowing your breath to become rhythmic and breathe naturally so that your breath is naturally rising and falling. When you feel relaxed, bring your awareness to the inside of your head or cranium and listen for a high-pitched sound. This high-pitched sound is the sound of your nervous system. It sounds similar to the high-pitched background sound of a television, but it's a little higher. And if you are under a lot of stress, the sound of your nervous system may become a ringing in the ears. But most of the time it's in the background, and you just need to relax, clear your mind, and listen to it. Listen for another couple seconds. And then go ahead and write your response. The sound of your nervous system carries a lot of information, and if you can learn this for yourself, you will find that being able to regulate your own stress level will become much easier, because you will learn to tap in and really pay attention to what your stress level is, and you will be able to calm yourself down through breath, clearing your mind, or perhaps through something like listening to the tuning forks. I have these in my office, and generally I teach a client how to use them once, and then I allow the client to use them if they wish every time they come back. And the way that you do this is to tap them on your knees and listen. And it generally has a very calming effect. Helps the body to regulate the breath, blood pressure. And And so I'm going to pass these around and let you try them. Hold them by the stem, not up here, by the stem. Tap them gently on your knees and listen. And if you don't want to do it, of course, you can just pass them along. So we were just listening as best as we could to our nervous system. And the premise is that we accept that sound as an indicator of your inner tuning. The tuning forks that are coming around right now are meant to help regulate that state. Now, how does that happen? Well, there's a couple of basic principles. One is resonance, and that is a physical phenomenon in which different frequencies of sound stimulate the body to vibrate different areas. Typically, low sound resonates in the lower part of the body, and high sound resonates in the higher part of the body. So when you hear those tuning forks, or perhaps when you heard the bell or the bowls that I played, your body was experiencing resonance with those sounds. Now, there's another thing that happens called entrainment. In this case, rhythm entrainment happens when there's music, but entrainment happens whether there's music or not. It's the presence of any external rhythmic stimulus. The natural rhythm of the heartbeat will be overridden and caused to pulse and sync with the sound source. So when you're listening to, say, the drum that I played, you might have found that your heart rate was moving into sync with that drum.
I have a question. I know that fluorescent lights flicker really fast, and I get really agitated when they're on. Is that because of that? That even if it's not sound, it's a rhythmic stimulus that my body's responding to?
I think so.
They also make a sound.
They do, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of people find them irritating. So think about your refrigerator at home. It's humming all the time. It's going on and off. And believe it or not, but you're coming and trained to, even the appliances in the house. When you're in the room as a therapist and working with clients, you'll experience entrainment, right? You'll notice that you're both crossing your legs the same way. That happens all the time. Or you're both kind of in the same kind of position. Or maybe you start using the same words. You will notice entrainment happening in the therapy. So why not take advantage of that and enhance it with sound? The singing bowls that we listen to have tones and overtones that can be felt in every cell of your body. Same with the tuning forks. And as you know, those singing bowls have a long, deep, and rich history. So also it's connecting us to tradition. And that's a tradition that you may choose to discover and follow or not. But there are many pathways that using these instruments can open you to. So I would encourage you to be a wave maker. You are anyway. Be a conscious wave maker. Now, there's another important thing to be thinking about in therapy that has to do with the sound, and that is sympathetic and parasympathetic dominance, which is what trauma and stress are all about. So when our body is in a sympathetic dominance, it's the fight or flight reflex. If you perceive threat, your body automatically goes into sympathetic dominance. Stress is experienced by the body as a threat. Sometimes we need that. Sometimes we need to get out of the way of a moving car or something like that. But most of the time, it's perceived threat that is not really a threat, and our body is tensing and stressing, and we don't need to do that. That is a big part of what you will eventually be working with your clients on in one way or another. What happens in sympathetic dominance is that your cognitive and motor functioning becomes compromised. You become reactive, and you'll be repeating the same mistakes over and over. Now, parasympathetic dominance is present when there's relaxation and optimal functioning. So when you're feeling safe, you will experience maximal cognitive and motor functioning during those times. You know, when you feel like you're just kind of flowing through the day and you're walking and your body feels good and everything's working, you're in parasympathetic dominance at that time. You will be able to solve problems creatively because you have more functioning in your brain available to you because you're not stressed. And this is a time when you can set intention, when you're not just blindly reacting. So what's the goal, do you suppose, for therapists? Is it to try and be in parasympathetic dominance all the time? I don't think that's possible. So I think the goal, I would suggest the goal is the ability to transform from sympathetic dominance to parasympathetic dominance, to be able to move from one to the other. And how do you notice that? Well, if you decide to practice listening to your nervous system, that's one way. You're going to notice, oh, I have this high pitch ringing in my ears. I must be stressed. What's going on? And then you stop and you slow down and you try to regulate yourself. That's one way. You might notice that you're clenching your toes or your hands, that your body is contorted, that you're clenching your sphincter. Those are all signs that you are stressed. And this is very important when you're working with clients because you might be sitting there with a client and you'll notice that your body is stressed and tense. And what do you think your client is picking up? The same thing. And maybe going back and forth in the room, you may be training each other with this. So I would say it's a therapist's job to be paying attention to this process and to be learning how to transform the sympathetic into the parasympathetic as much as possible, as often as possible. It will make your work 1,000 times easier and more pleasurable and rewarding. We can do that with the sound instruments through resonance and entrainment. Yes.
So if we naturally entrain, like you're saying, I guess I'm wondering, like, who wins? You know what I mean? Like, is it whoever's in a more sort of emotionally intense state, even if it's like the therapist is maximally relaxed, that would kind of dominate the entrainment, or if the client's like on the verge of a panic attack, would that just take over my physiology? You know what I mean?
It probably would take over.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good question because I think what has to happen is that as the therapist, we need to really be paying attention to our countertransference in our own body and then be able to slow things down. And you might not be able to help your client just through regulating yourself alone, which is why we have all these other techniques and tools. But if you're not paying attention and you're getting kind of driven along with that stress level, then your effectiveness is going to be diminished. The auditory system, there's the outer ear, the middle ear, and the inner ear. The inner ear is of particular interest because it is where we are picking up sounds, and depending on the frequencies, we're translating those sounds into energy for the brain. So we are re-energizing our brain through the sound that we hear, through the inner ear. The inner ear is also attached to something called the vagus nerve, which is a major nerve in the body. We'll come back to that in a minute. Dr. Tomatis is the person who created this theory of transforming stimulus from our environment into energy in our brain. So thus the ear is the generator for the nervous system and the brain. The inner ear is the organ of listening, calling for a specific posture, a dynamic interaction with the environment, and focused attention. Think about what you're doing most of the time when you're sitting with your clients. You're listening.
That would suggest that a deaf person is in a state of disorganization relative to their attention.
That would be a part of his theory, yes.
I haven't experienced that with deaf people.
Well, I don't know how strongly he would say that I don't think he would say deaf people are disorganized.
Right.
But I think he would say that, and he created a device for the deaf to kind of take over this function.
I see.
So motor and sensory impulses are sent along the vagus nerve, and the vagus nerve is connected to the throat, the larynx, the heart, diaphragm. And so basically our sensory impulses have a lot to do with regulating our breath, our speech, and our heart rate. Again, this is talking about stress. There it goes down the road. Okay, so some systems that have been devised. Helen Bonney, who I mentioned earlier, devised something called guided imagery and music. Does anyone know about this? Has anyone used it? Yeah.
I did a research paper on it.
Oh, you did?
For a sound class here.
Yeah. So she was influenced by humanistic and transpersonal psychologies, Carl Rogers, Abraham Maslow. She was local, Northern California. And GIM refers to all forms of music image making in an expanded state of consciousness, non-ordinary states. So the drum that I played earlier, your heart rate was becoming entrained to the drum, and your body was coming into resonance with it. And if we were to have done that for, say, 20, 25, 30 minutes, your imagination would have been stimulated in a way that you may have started to get picture images or bodily sensations. And that is a part of what would happen in GIM. Usually, there would be music played, intentional pieces of music played, and also art materials would be available for those who wanted to draw. The images don't need to be something that's drawn. It could be body felt sensations, or it could be pictures. The symbols and the imagery then can be discussed in the therapy, much like dream imagery. Dream material could be discussed, and it can amplify the client's process. So I've been talking a lot about what we hear, but there's also something very profound that happens in between what we hear, and that is a little bit harder to describe. But you may know that in music, what's in between the notes, where pauses take place, is very important. And so what this slide is exemplifying is not only what's in between the notes, but what happens to that music when we're not hearing it anymore, but we still hear it inside of our head. There's something profound about inner hearing and outer hearing. Seek the sound that never ceases. Seek the sun that never sets. Now we're getting into some deep territory that I can't really go very deeply into, but I can say that Nada Yoga is a yoga of sound, and that it is the sound which is not heard by the ear from outside of the body, but rather from within. So if you're in a deep state of meditation, for instance, if you engage in deep listening, say you sit and you listen to your nervous system and your inner body sounds, and you keep listening, and you keep listening, and you keep listening, you are going to be experiencing this sound that comes from within. That's where meditation takes us, and that's what Nada Yoga is about. It's about the yoga, the union that takes place in yoga through sound. And if you meditate yourself, or if you have clients who meditate, this is a very important part of nourishing the psyche that takes place. The last piece that I want to mention is listening to recorded music. Now, this quote is bringing up the possibility of the importance of music being a bridge. So I'm going to play a piece of music. It'll take a couple of minutes, and what I'd like you to do is just to relax and listen to it actively. So be comfortable, but allow your body and your mind to be alert as you listen to it.
Oh,
see how the music can create a mood. So I'm going to leave you with a poem and some images from a book that I have at the front called Water Sound Images. Tone heard it from sound. Sound heard it from secret. Secret heard it from the void. The void heard it from Tao. So I hope this gives you a glimmer of this really exciting and deeply traditioned way of using sound, ways that it may be applied to psychotherapy, and I'd be happy to take your questions for the next 15 minutes.
Do you have specific ways, besides the tuning forks, that you use the instruments or other people's songs or music in therapy?
Yes, the tuning forks are something that are always available. The bell exercise that I did in the beginning, where you listen to it, I use that one quite often.
So you just have it as an option for the client, or?
Usually it's something that I suggest. Particularly if I'm working with someone who, say we're working on anxiety. One thing that I might do is suggest that we use the bell in the beginning of the session, just to kind of calm things down, bring attention and focus, and that exercise helps to create that. The drum I use oftentimes for intentional journeys, and that can happen individually in a session, that can happen in a group. That's another thing, all of these instruments can be used in group work as well. It doesn't have to be individual work. That usually involves a bit of a scheduling change, because you need usually more than a 50-minute hour to do a drum journey. So you need to take that into account. The bowls can be used for, again, for focus, or for, certainly not in a time of crisis. You know, I mean, it's important to realize that all of these techniques are to be done at a point in the therapy when you're not dealing with a crisis, of course. Because any crisis that's present in the room needs to be dealt with on its own immediately. So if somebody is, say, working on working on a personal growth phase in their therapy, the bowls might be appropriate, because that's going to help create an environment for that person in that moment where they can have a more expanded state of awareness. Listening to music also can happen, like the GIM that I described, or just listening to a piece of music and allowing it to evoke feeling and emotion.
Do you use a bell before every session?
Not in front of every session, but I use it a lot. And people seem to really enjoy it, because you're rushing through the world, you're driving, you're parking, you're running into the building, and it's nice to be able to have that moment to kind of bring it all down, bring your focus into the room. It's really useful. Yes?
Do you know, has anyone found a way to measure your vibrational frequency? The vibrational frequency of your central nervous system?
I'm not sure about that. I imagine if you were to look on the internet, you could probably find that, somebody who does it.
It would be no different than this, right? This has been converted to a visual representation of the megahertz, but it would be identifying that. Since you're the only one who can hear it, I guess you'd have to find a way of measuring it.
It would have to be some way, I think, of hooking up the body. It would become a somatic kind of picture. Yeah.
I just wanted to know what the whistling jug thing is.
Oh yes. Oh, did she? Oh. Yes, that is. That's an instrument from Peru, and it's an ancient instrument. It's a double vessel whistle.
It's got water in it?
It has water inside. So you may have heard when I was coming around, you could hear the water moving to one side, and then the other side whistles. And the beauty of this instrument, it's especially useful in ritual, in groups. The beauty of this instrument is that it uses all 4 elements. So it's made out of clay, which is the earth. It holds water. The clay was fired in order to make it hard, and it displaces the air in order to whistle. So it's sacred.
Can you recommend a place that has instruments?
There used to be a place called Lark in the Morning. I don't think they're there anymore, but you might find them online. The place in San Rafael.
You got your yoko jig that I can never remember what it's called. You know that shop?
Bananas?
No, the Indian place, right? They've got stuff there. Musical instruments.
Oh, I don't know. I'm not recalling it. Yes.
So I'm seeing so many different traditions. Is that something that you're personally connected with, or do you ask clients if they're personally connected with any of these traditions, or how is that kind of brought in?
Some of them I have a personal connection with. It can become a part of the conversation with the client who some clients want to work on their own history, their own ancestry, and that may get evoked with the sound instruments. I would never impose anything on a client, and that goes for any of these techniques as well as any cultural kind of overlay. So that's a good point, to be mindful of that and to be open to talking with clients about it. But usually, I mean, it's not an issue usually for people, and moreover, it can be an enhancement, to talk about the culture that something came from. Like, for instance, this instrument or the drum. I always try to allow things to arise in a way that enhances. And if it's going to be a stumbling block, then we don't go there. We do something else. Any other questions or comments? Thank you for doing these exercises and participating. And take my information and feel free to contact me in the future if you have any other questions or if anything comes up.
Thank you.
Thank you.